Hey, welcome to the Quilt Stream. My name is Chip Connor. I am your host. Today is Monday, January 17th, and sometimes there's a little issue with forgetting things, turning on the sound. So let's get to it. There we go. What do Colonel Sanders and Piet Mondrian, what do they have in common? They have something in common with you and me, and that's pretty much throughout their entire lives. They spent their existence in obscurity, that nobody knew who they were. They had a dream and they finally found success later on in life. And yeah, after it was almost over, it just began. So today I'm all about primary colors and just seeing how we all get inspired. And so as I was looking through my EQ8, my design software, and I was digging around for inspiration late yesterday, and all of a sudden I came up with, oh my gosh, yeah, I think I have it, stained glass. And then I started thinking about stained glass, and I started thinking about famous artists. So today we're going to talk about I'm going to screw up his name, Piet Mondrian, a Dutch painter who was born in 1872, and he was inspired by Picasso, the Cubism movement, and he actually is somebody who is very quilty in his own right. And you know that one of my favorite things to do is steal like an artist. So sometimes the inspiration, it doesn't matter where it's going to come from, but just let it grab you, and then you just let it take off and make its own life, and that's what we're here to do together. So maybe the guy who, Rubik's, maybe he was inspired by Cubism too. Get it? Cubism? And just dealing with primary colors. So before we get into some paper piecing, let's say a hello to the room. Let's do Rob's roll call. And we've got Fizz. Hello, Fizz. We've got Susan and Cecilia, Valerie, Marcy, Trand, Janice, and Rob. Who else? Carrie. Carrie's nice. It's nice to see you. And we got Stuart. Did I already say Stuart? We got Barb over at the Naughty Yarnies, Mr. Charlie McDonald, and Mr. Berg, and lastly, Suzanne. So welcome everybody. It's so nice to see you. Happy Monday. So, I'd love to dedicate most of this effort today to really getting into the paper piecing, but I'm going to take you on a quick tour of what I was doing in EQ8 as I was exploring yesterday. So I'm going to take us into Chrome, and hopefully you'll be able to share the screen with me. But what's really awesome is that there's all these different libraries that if I go into here in the very far left, you can see there's a little drop down. I can't help the way that it's going to show on the screen, but there's a little drop down, and then I can go into my block libraries, and I can see, hey, in EQ8, if I drop down here into foundation pieced, and then I go down to stained glass, this is where there's different versions of existing block patterns that are like stained glass. So there's blocks, there's grids, and that's the one I found. There are pictures and glass quarters, and on and on and on and on. So these are all just foundation paper piece, but what I got stuck on was the stained glass grids, which, hello, that's, to me, is a direct interpretation of Piet Mondrian. And so I just selected all of these, and I can hit the first one and then select all, and then I can just add these to my sketchbook, which I have already done. So now I can come over here in my, my quilt work table, and we can decide, is this going to be one one block, 2 blocks, one, if we're only going to do one paper piecing, maybe we're going to make a small mat, maybe a mug rug, or let's say I'm going to do 3 by 3, and that's what I have been working on. And then I can come over, if I'm up here at the top bar, I go down to design, and now all of a sudden I can just start plugging and playing all of these different blocks. So I'm going to just click one, add it, and then let's say that's the only one that I was interested in. I could actually, I'm going to undo that. I could actually hold down my command key, then click it, and then all of them become that, that same block. I'm going to undo that. And then the fun thing, again, if I wanted to do every other one, I could hit the Option key, and then it does the every other one. And that's really cool. So you might say, hey, well, why wouldn't we, I can do them individually. Why would I want them all to be the same? Well, what's really fun is that I can actually rotate some of them, and they start having a different visual appeal, and then it might be that I just color them differently, which I think is awesome. So let's try that. So if I went to now back at the main bar, I'm going to go to my fabric tools right up the top, and now I can start choosing some colors. So for Piet Mondrian, his colors are, when he was really taking off and exploring his earlier concept, he was trying to strip away all existence of reality, and he was really playing with dimension by the different colors and how that would work. And what he used to do is he would put pieces of colored paper up on his wall and just start playing with arrangement. And what I find is interesting is that he started out and spent most of his career replicating museum pieces and creating scientific sketches. But when he was really taken on with the cubism and I'm never going to say this right, it's the new art. I'm gonna say it's also called the new art. I can never say that word. Neoplasticism. There, it's kind of close. But again, they were trying to just get away from like doing all of these representation in natural form of like trees. And he loved trees, painting trees for most of his life. But then he was getting away from that, and he would do suggestions of trees. So maybe, like if you look behind me, you know, like this could be a suggestion of maybe a political map. It could be that, hey, here in the United States, we often will have our red for conservative, and we have blue for liberal, and then we have yellow for independent. So like it could be these representations that have a whole nother reality, and rather than being the stated representation of, hey, this is this and this is this. So, you know, if you're as we're doing our coloring, we could just explore like, hey, give these a different meaning. I know that some people are attacking in quilting and in knitting, they're doing temperature quilts or temperature blankets with knitting. And so maybe you have a color that is representing this. And it's not just like, hey, here's these colors that we're putting because we think they're pretty, but it's also that they also have meaning. And I absolutely love that. So I didn't really give that much thought to colors. I'm just kind of running with his basic black, white, red, blue, and yellow. So we're going to do some coloring over in our working project. And so now I can scroll between the different colors, and I'm going to choose a kind of a bright blue, I think. Or actually, no, I'm going to use the eyedropper because I like the blue that they had already used. But let's say I'm going to replace all of the purples which I can, oops, let's go eyedropper. There we go. And now I'm gonna go with my paintbrush, and all the purples, boom, we just made blue. And then maybe all of the oranges, we're gonna go into white. So I can scroll through, and there's a nice crisp white, and I'm going to make that, all those white. And then now we're getting more into that original version of the Mondrian art. Now I guess does this make me a Dutch artist now? I've got my paint, my painting overalls going. So here we go. Let's say I'm gonna add also one last thing is sometimes we're gonna introduce some black. So I'm gonna be kind of light-handed with that. So I'm gonna say this is black, and maybe this one's black, and we'll replace one of these blues with black, and then I want a big one here. So let's go there. And I'm not the biggest yellow fan, so maybe we'll get rid of this one. So now we've got a little less yellow, but it's just a matter of playing around and finding something that really it gets you excited. Now, what I love about EQ8 is that I can go back, and once I've got a layout that I'm really excited about, then I can go to print and export, and let's say I'm going to choose this first block, and right now I have that set to a 7-inch block. I'm okay with that, and I'm going to go into right here at the top where we have foundation. I can actually print this. So I'm going to give a preview, and what's awesome is that EQ8 is automatically going to tell me what the assigned order is. So this particular block, they're wanting us to create it in 2 pieces, and you can go from A1, A2, A3, and then yeah, this is kind of very little for me to see, but and then B1, B2, B3. So I think that is really awesome. So let's say we are happy with that. We can go ahead and click print, and then your printer is going to give you a lovely, lovely copy. So I've got 2 versions here. This is normal copy paper, and you can even see there's a lot of light in this room, and you've got the colors still shining through, and it's pretty good to see, but when it's against a flat surface, you may not be able to see, because we're going to be working on the back side. You may not be able to see that as well, versus going with actual foundation paper piecing paper, which now this is the back side that you're seeing versus the front side, the printed side. So work with whatever makes you comfortable. I would say if you've never done it before, start out. You probably have a printer and copy paper at home. But then if you're willing to, if you like it and you're willing to try a different way, I would say try out the foundation paper. And the one that I have is from June Taylor, and I couldn't tell you how much I paid for it, but in the pack it gives you like 50 sheets. And depending on how much you paper piece, I know that Charlie McDonald, I'm sorry, McDonald, he is in the room and he loves paper piecing. But yeah, you probably may want to have a supply of this on hand. So other tools that you're probably going to want is a card. You're going to need something that helps you fold, and I'll show you what that is. And actually, this one is a card that I got for a birthday a long, long while ago, and it says, it's a little early in the day to wear your do-me sweater, don't you think? I absolutely love that. It's so, so cute. Yeah, I have good friends. So you're going to have next rotary. You're going to want your rotary cutter. And then I like tweezers. Sometimes you have to unpick. You may want some of those, or perhaps you could. I actually use mine sometimes if I'm just helping the fabric or the paper go under the needle. I use them. Some people like to use a stiletto, whatever's comfortable for you. And then one of the best tools that I would never ever use anything else is by a company called ECamm Designs, and it's at a quarter, and they make a couple of different sizes. And with whether you're doing foundation paper piecing, or if you're doing what did I just say? Foundation paper piecing, or if you're doing normal piecing, all of us use a 1/4 inch seam, and these rulers are actually giving you a little ridge, which is adding that 1/4 inch seam for you. And there's two sizes. These are both called at a quarter. And so you may be working on a little project, or you may have to do a larger cut. So depending on which one, but you won't break the bank on those, but you will be very happy that you did get one. Now, I've never really had an occasion to use it yet, but they also make add an 1/8. If you're somebody who really likes small seam allowances when you're doing your paper piecing, they also have this one, which is, of course, green. So let's show you this here. It's the at a 1/8, and they're both at what, 6 inches long, and then it's just the difference of whether you're doing the 1/4 or the 1/8, how much of a seam allowance that you're gonna get. So, what about fabric? Of course, we want fabric. So I went with the prescribed Mondrian colors, which I have my black, I have my white, I have my red, blue, and yellow. And really, the beautiful thing about your paper piecing is this is really going to be a fabric buster for you. And I would say, you know, like, just this is the time to play, play, play. Now, I know that let's say you're inspired by doing the Mondrian, I would say don't get caught up on these colors. But what's really awesome, and again, this is all about stealing like an artist, I'd love quickly just to show you on Google how people have been, if I just do a Mondrian, I'm going to go Mondrian artwork, and then I say inspired, and I'm going to share my screen with you. Bear with. There we go. So here we have all of these inspired art pieces, and like this never existed in his lifetime, or somebody was like, oh, I love turtles, but they kind of just morphed it into their own design. But like, look at the different uses. Now, I believe it was in the 60s that he also inspired fashion in a big way. So look at these boots. Can you? I could just see Susan wearing these, Mrs. Kravitz. I could see her wearing these in the day with her dress, and I think she'd look lovely. All right, speaking of which, I'm going to get to the room and just see what kind of chitter-chatter. So yeah, so there we go. Yep. All right, so Mr. Berg says, Frank Lloyd Wright, the architect, created some very cool stained glass and fireplace murals that would be cool quilt blocks and designs. Absolutely. What is his most famous? It's Falling, is it Falling River or Waterfall? The Waterfall House. And, okay, I have been corrected, and I'm going to say now Pete. The way Dutch people would say it, love you, Quilty, take on his work. So Pete. We're going to say Pete. No longer Piet. It's Pete. I stand corrected. And then, of course, Rob, I'm going to blah, 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 blah. This person also did some amazing geometric paintings. He liked diagonal slashes rather than the grid. And Rob, one of the things that I thought was interesting is that apparently there was a guy he met in Paris who admired his modern paintings, not so much on his natural forests and his scientific sketches, but when Pete did anything with angles, he got very frustrated with him. And like there was this big argument about like what is the modern way. And so actually, if you notice in Pete's works, I mean, everything is very 90 degrees, no angles there. Okay, so Charlie, and I take it on his good authority that the add an eighth is great for the Juicy Juice, tiny, tiny blocks, and that's what he recommends. And actually, that would be in EQ8. Let me go back to EQ8 because I can totally see what you're talking about. So let me go back to the design and block tools. There we go. So when we go to, oh, I need to get rid of that comment. There we go. There we go. So in Juicy Juices, he does a lot of the kind of log cabin inspired. And so like this in the lower, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Let's make it that big. This guy right here, yeah, I can see because there's so many intersections that are very close to each other that this blue piece right here actually might be only 1/4 of an inch. And so it's just easier if you have a little less seam allowance between the next transition, which is that black fabric. And so, yeah, I can totally see how that would be beneficial to have the smaller seam allowance. And Susan, yes, I know your fashion sense. I know that you are a daring person and you are awesome. So Charlotte, welcome. Nice to see you. And okay, so Wally says, so much inspiration, so little time. And yeah, so I'm inspired. So let's play with some paper piecing. And as I said, I printed out on some paper piecing. And forgive me, I wish Charlie was actually given this demonstration because he has so much experience with it. He has done some beautiful, intricate quilts, and it's always like, oh my gosh, that looks like a lot of work. This is more my speed, where I like the smaller pieces and less of them. And you know, whether it's like, again, I'm kind of right now into some of the wall hanging sizes, so maybe 25-inch or less I think is really great. And it's, you know, at that size it's nice to just practice a technique, and if you wanted to display it in your home, it doesn't take up a lot of space. So for me, smaller is better. So and that's what we're going to work on. So the first one that I'm going to do, I did print in color, but I'm going to ignore the colors. And we have, I'm going to see if I can make this appear nice and clear for you. So I know it's really, really small, but on the printed paper piecing pattern, this is telling me I have A1, A2, A3, A4, A5. So I'm going to work on the top first, and then A6. So I have these 6 pieces to sew, and then we're just 3 pieces. Once those are done, then we can assemble those together. And it's really, once you get into the rhythm, it just seems like you're going through this process, and it can be pretty relaxing. So for me, I don't know about you, and Charlie, you can maybe give me a yay or a nay, but for me, the first piece, which is actually two pieces of fabric, are always the toughest for me because I have to think about how the fabric is going to land. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with some white fabric, and I'm going to loosely take a piece that is, I'm going to make this piece really big. I'm going to start out with maybe some red. Let's do red. So I know that this is more than I need, so I'm really worrying about A1, and that's the size that I know is more than enough. And actually, this would actually work out better. I have less to trim, so I'm going to work on this way. And I know that when I'm working on this, I'm actually working A1, A2. So you have your printed side, and that's actually my sewing side. So what I really want to do is flip over my paper, and then I'm going to lay down A1, and A1 is actually going to land exactly where it is. Once I've sewn it, it doesn't need to turn. Now, the second piece, A2, actually does need to turn. So let's find, A2 is actually one of the little sashing pieces of black, and I need roughly, that would actually do it. I don't need too much. So I'm going to lay A1 down, and actually from here, yep, it looks good. And then A2 is actually going to get sewn like this, and once it's done, that is actually going to get folded over. So I'm just lining these two up and try not to go too far past the line. And I don't have to be that exact or straight. I just need to know that when I flip my paper over, that you can see my fabric. Can you guys see that? You can see that there's some red right here beyond the printed black area. So I know that I've already gotten enough space to exceed that line, so I feel comfortable sewing this line, that first line. So I'm going to go ahead and move this as gingerly as I can over to my needle, and I'm going to lower my needle with the hand wheel and put that needle right in that first sewing corner. So right at the corner. Now, before I do that, I'm going to tell you about my settings that I use while I'm paper piecing. And let me get out of there. I'm going to go home. Bear with. There we go. All right, so when I'm quilting and I'm going to do some foundation paper piecing, you can use a universal needle size 80-12, or you could use a quilting needle a size 75-11, depending on what measurement that you use. And then as far as weight, thread, you could use a 50 weight cotton, and it washes nicely. There's not a lot of stretch, but if you prefer polyester, that's good too. And then, actually, I'm going to take you one other place before we get to the paper. So I'm going to move this away, and I'm going to actually show you. I'm going to get rid of my first stitch. One thing that you want to do is put on your straight needle plate. So ordinarily, I usually keep the wide plate that allows my needle to go back and forth. But for this, I'm just doing some straight stitching. So I only need that little hole, And either way is fine, whatever is comfortable for you. I'm just letting you know what my settings are. And let me put this foot back on. I'm using a straight foot, and for Bernina, I'm using my 37. And then, what was another thing I wanted to tell you? There was something else. I think that's it. Oh, and then with the stitch length, that was the point of all this. So with the stitch length, you normally, at least mine on my Bernina, the default setting is a 2.5 millimeter stitch length, and that's over here. If I can show you, we have on the left is the 2.5, and then what I do for paper piecing is I lower my stitch length to 2 millimeters, and the reason for that is when you're actually sewing on through the fabric and through the paper itself, you're creating a perforation on that paper, and with a smaller stitch length, you're creating more bites into that paper. And so when it comes time, once you've done your block and you've sewn it all together, you're going to be removing that paper, and it's a lot easier to tear that paper. So good idea to lower that stitch length and try it. I mean, whatever works for you, you feel free to experiment. All right, so now I'm going to put this back together, and I'm going to go from A1 to A2. And then, as I was beginning to say earlier, when I'm going ahead and putting in my needle every time, I like to do it manually rather than just letting the needle drop where you think it might be. I like to be really sure that I'm in the right position. And so I'm good with that. I'm going to drop my needle. My machine is set up to do a stay stitch, so it's actually going to sew like 3 times in place before I get going. And I just follow the line. So again, I'm sewing on the front side, on the printed side of the paper with the fabric on the back. Now, I do know one thing about my my machine is that when I've come to the end and I really want to finish on that line, I don't really want to exceed that line. So I have my solid sewing line, and then I have a dotted, which is my seam allowance, and that'll end up being my cut line when I'm cutting out the entire block. But for me, I don't like to exceed that sew line, and I know that with my particular machine, when I use the automatic thread cutter, it'll advance my stitch one place like it just did. And so I always guesstimate when I'm one stitch before that last stitch that I know that I'm cutting, and you just get to know your machine. But then it allows me to make sure that I'm finishing on that stitch line. All right, so we we did our first stitch, and now, as I said earlier, all we know that the red is going to stay in place. The black, which was my kind of sashing, that's what's going to get folded over. So what I want to do before I do anything, I give it a nice little finger press, and then I actually take it to my iron. How could I forget mentioning the iron earlier? But I take it to my iron, and I just give it a little love to make sure that it's going to stay. I take this exactly how it is once it's been pressed, and then I grab my lovely little card, and then I turn the, actually, I'm sorry, I'm going to put the fabric side down, go back to the printed side, and now I have my line where I just stitched. I'm going to go to the very next line. For me, this is how I like to do it, is give myself a little extra, and I fold on that second line. I'm going to fold it over, and just the paper, not the fabric. Then I take my, where did it go? Oh, I take my add a quarter, and it is just going to nestle right in there. We've created a ridge there with that paper, and then I lop off the excess, and then I come back to the fabric side, and you see I have a nice straight line that I can work with for that next color. So this time I'm going to use some blue. Are you feeling blue? So I'm going to take some blue, and I don't need that much, so I'm going to cut this a little bit more. And again, it's just a guessing game how much I'll need. Now, I have a pretty much straight line on this piece of scrap fabric. Don't worry if it's not perfectly straight. All I need to do is line that up exactly with that, that black fabric, and then flip it over, and we're going to sew. So I pinch these, and I'm going to flip it over, and now I'm going to transfer this under the needle again. And I try not to move the fabric around too much, because once you've gotten it under the needle, sometimes it will want to shift. And that's no fun when your fabric folds underneath and then you sew it down and then you've got to unpick it. So I know that my fabric's under here really nice and secure, and I'm lowering my needle right in the corner to that second sew line. And I'm finishing one stitch before I cut that, and then I bring it back onto my sewing surface and flip that over, give it a finger press, and now you see that between the first, the second, and third, we've actually trapped that sashing between the two, and it's a really nice, clean, straight line that we're creating. So fold over that fabric we just sewn, and then I'm going to go ahead and press that. And then that's in place. So now it wants me to add another black line. So we're going to come back and let's go back down. We're going to add one more, actually not yet. So look at the directions. 1, 2, 3. We have 3 pieces that we've just sewn. Now it's wanting us to work on this way. So this is going to be a 4, which is also black. So I'm going to flip that over, and let's try, hopefully I have a piece that is long enough. I do, and that's kind of a lot. So I'm going to trim that. All right, so now that is over here. And actually, before I even do that, so I want a working edge to play with on this side. Since we're finished with A1, A2, and A3, now we can trim anything of the extra that's on this side, so we know where to line up our next fabric. So I'm going to go back to the front, go back to the printed side, and then I'm going to not that first line. I like to go to the second line just to be safe. And we're going to lop off the excess. There we go. Now I have a straight line. I know where to lay my fabric. I'm going to lay that down there, pinch, and go back to the needle. All right, so now I'm going to that stitch line, that first stitch line here. Perfect. And then let's go down, and we're going to flip it over, give it a finger press, and then take it back to the machine. I'm sorry, to the iron. And it's starting, I mean, you guys can see, it's really starting to take shape. And I think this is a good pattern to start with, just because it is just all squares and rectangles. It's not a lot of angles, and there's not a lot to get lost, which I think is great. All right, so now I'm going to fold over again. We're going to get rid of the excess black that we don't need, just like we did before. And now we're going to do A5, which is this slice right here. And this time, I'm going to do some white. So I'm going to take that, I'm going to trim off some white. There we go. And then flip. Oh, my thread broke. That wasn't very nice. Okay, let's try that again. And then since I've been moving, and I just want to make sure that I'm not misaligning any of the fabric. Haha, this time it's sewing. Okay, so now we come back, and this time we're folding over this way, and then we're going to press that down. All right, so now we're pretty close on getting the top half of this, and I'm going to show you from this piece of paper. So far, we've attacked this top part, and I'm really trying not to do any kind of trimming just yet for the outer part. So now we're going to go to back to my card. We're going to do a little fold. And now that I have the pretty much the first 3 or 4 pieces done with the top, now I have a lot of excess over here. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. And you can see that it's starting to take shape. So you have, really, I think it's really pretty. All right, before I get into the bottom half, let's go ahead and go back to the room, see if you guys are identifying any of my missteps, which there probably are. Oops. So Rob is saying, sorry to be pretentious, but also check out Hilma of Klimt for inspiration. Her geometric paintings have been getting a lot of attention lately after being ignored in her lifetime. I am not familiar with her, and I'm gonna mark that. I have just tagged that comment just so I can go back and look at that. I love it. And okay, so Brendan wanted to know, what kind of thread do you use? I like the thread by Wonderfill called Deco Bob. Very thin and doesn't cause any bulk when folding over the fabric. So actually, this is from Connecting Threads, and this is the Essential Pro. So you can see I have a spool of it, and this is. And actually, I didn't, so mine is polyester as well. It's, and this one happens to be, they're calling it white, but I see more creamy. As far as thread in my journey, I am not a thread, I'm not dedicated to a particular thread as of yet. When I first started out sewing, I had these, who is it? It is Gutermann. Sorry. I used to use Gutermann because it was like all of these colors that just came so nicely. And ever since then, I was like, it's really not my favorite. I do love the Connecting Threads thread. And then Carrie is saying she likes to use a 50 weight thread, nice and thin, and doesn't add bulk in the seam. So, yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I misread that? I think I said that to. I attributed that to Brendan before. And then Carrie also said to Susan that she likes to use fine poly thread by Superior Threads. I do like Superior Threads, which I think Superior Threads is owned by Knit Picks. So Stuart says he also likes the looks of the crisp sharpness of the foundation paper piecing, which really appeals to him. And I think if there was an order, I like strip piecing, and I like working with just working with the fabric, and then using templates. And then order next would be foundation paper piecing, and after that, English paper piecing. I know that some people, it might actually be in a different order. Maybe Yoan would have English paper piecing on the top of his list because that's what he do. And Yoan also said that he has Mondrian. I had a Mondrian book cover paper in high school. So I was actually asking Yoan the other day, so in school, what color, and this question I'm going to pose to all of you guys, when you were in school and you had your binders or your folders, what color was history, writing and grammar, math, science, history? What colors were those? And we'll even just say, like, history and math, what were those two colors? I have my opinions. Okay, so I'm going to get back to my working piece. And so now I have the top portion that is pretty well done. And now I do need to separate the top from the bottom because I'm actually in my own way. So what I'm going to do is just go to the outside of the, here's the top, and you can see I have my sew line, and then I have my seam allowance line. Actually, I'm going to cut away anything that's beyond the seam allowance just because I don't need it. And I haven't I haven't sewn on this next segment, and that's what I want to start getting room for. So I'm just going to make a little bit of reparations. Okay, so now I've got the top pretty much out of my way. If I wanted to, I could actually cut this piece off, and for giggles, I'm going to go ahead and just do that. So I'm going to get all of my fabric out of my way. And you know what I just noticed is that I forgot to add one piece of black. So let's do that before I get any further. So I'm going to add my black. Boop, boop, boop. And I'll go back to the needle. And here we have our sew line. Okay, and then I flip that over, give it a press, and trim. So this is the process that you're always going to be on repeat, and it's almost like you're doing a circuit. So you're going from cutting, and then going into sewing, and then pressing, and then cutting, and you just keep doing that over and over and over. And it is, once you get into it, you can actually get pretty fast at it. And sometimes I go so fast I forget what I'm supposed to be doing and I sew it wrong. So I'm trying to take it a little slower. That way I'm not a big goofball. All right, so you can see I just added another piece, and let's go. We have 3 pieces to do on 3 pieces, 1, 2, 3 that we're going to tackle now. So next color is, I didn't use white. I did use white. So actually I didn't use yellow. So I'm going to add a piece of yellow. I'm going to make the yellow a little longer. And then I need a little piece of black. So this yellow is, again, it's like we're starting our first piece again. So yellow is going to be our first that gets laid down. And then I'm going to do my black. The black is what's going to get flipped over. All right, and now I'm going to sew. So I'm going B1 to B2. It's like I'm playing Battleship. B1 is the yellow. So B1 is the yellow, B2 is the black. So I'm going to fold over the black. And then I don't think I have much to trim, but we'll see what we've got. I'm going to flip it face down and do my folding. Where's my little one? So this is where the little guy helps. And you know what? I'm looking at this. This is annoying me. I'm going to go ahead and cut that off because it's just wanting to flop around. Okay, now I'm ready for, let's do our red. I'll do another piece of red because it's small. And that'll be our third and final piece with that one. Now, I'm even going to say, if you look at my desk, it becomes you end up getting a nest in front of you. And if you're finding yourself, you have all these scraps of paper, after a little, scraps of fabric, at some point, you just get tired of putting them into your process and your flow of putting them in the garbage. And you just wind up with this huge fabric mess in front of you, and your floor probably looks awful too. But that's foundation paper piecing. All right, so let's go back to the needle, make that final stitch. This is B2 to B3. Okay, and I'm going to flip that over, give it a finger press. And now we're just going to do a little bit of trimming there. All right, so now you can see it's starting to take shape. And we have two more pieces that we actually need to cut. So I'm going to go ahead, and this is where I'm going to do a little bit of fine tuning. And I'm going to actually, there's a very small line between these two pieces. So I'm going to consider this one unit, this is another unit. And there's a very small line between them that I know that is safe to cut them apart. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. All right, now we've got that. And I think this one's already looking pretty good. With the first piece, I'm going to go ahead and trim. Where's my little card? And there's actually no fabric that I need to get rid of there, so that's good. And I'm going to work on this side. And I really am okay there. So I think I'm pretty much pretty well on all sides. Yeah, I'm pretty good. So I'm going to lay that one aside. Now we're going to trim the bottom piece. And that one, there's really not much to spare there. This side, we could cut off just a little bit. Same thing here. And same thing here. Now, one thing that I did notice that I think I made a slight boo-boo when I was originally, and I guess this is a good thing to show people, is that when I was making enough room, I forgot, and somehow I missed it twice, that I didn't extend that fabric to include the seam allowance. But let's say I did it right, who's gonna know? Who's gonna know? So you want to make sure that you're giving enough seam allowance for the entire block. But we'll pretend that I was right. So now I'm going on all the cut lines. Great. So there's that. And then we have this bottom piece that I'm going to do just a little bit of trimming on the paper. So that I can put these together. All right, now I've got my two pieces, and what I want to do is lay them together, the tops and the bottom, and that is actually going to look really good. So now you want to carefully make sure that you're grabbing both the paper and the fabric, and that all those corners, so you have 4 in this corner, you're going to make sure that those line up very nicely. And then we're going to take that to our needle. And we're going to go back onto that sew line. And we're doing our piecing of those together. All right, so we've taken the two pieces and we've put those together, and now we created that perfect that seam. And you notice that we have the same width for the sashing on all of those, and all we have to do is give it a finger press and a little bit of ironing, and it is going to be good to go. So from EQ8 into a finished quilt block, I think it looks pretty darn terrific. And I'm going to continue with these, and I'm actually going to make one that is maybe 25 inches square, but I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, maybe put some sashing in between. And I wholeheartedly recommend, if you haven't played with EQ8, or if you don't have it but just work off of a grid, you can create easily your own paper piecing pattern, and just do something that's graphic and geometric, and just have some fun with it. All right, I'm going to go back to the room and see how we're doing. So somewhere I missed, Angel had a tip. I must have missed it. So Stuart said that there was a, he says that the foundation paper piecing makes my brain hurt each time I start. It takes a long time for my brain to get into the routine of it. And yeah, so I am with you, Stuart. Yesterday, when I started practicing, and I was like trying to remember which goes first and like where to lay the fabric. Once you get all past that, I mean, I feel like I just get into the rhythm, but it's like something, once you've done it once and then you come back to it, it does get easier over time. Oh, there we go. So she marks the papers. So she does, Angel says she marks the papers so that she doesn't get confused. And so do you mark like where to lay your fabrics? Is that what you do to get yourself going? So Rob is going to try and add free foundation paper piecing to his list of things to try this year. I think you were going to enjoy it, Rob. So, Brendan, it's funny that you're making this comment. What do you guys do with all your trimming? I'm saving up mine to stuff some quilted inspired Scotty dog stuffed animals I have on the to-do list. And I was thinking about that, and I was like, you know, there's have you guys ever seen here, maybe online, but there's here in Seattle, there's this gum wall, and I believe it's still there. I don't know if it's still there. But in Pike's Place Market, there's this Seattle gum wall, and people, all the tourists, they come and they just add their gum to the wall. I thought it would be fun to kind of create a gum wall, but using all kinds of shreds of fabric and just like putting a little bit of the Mod Podge, and because you're going to get all of these different colors, and I think that would be a lot of fun. Just like get them wet, put it on there, and just keep layering it and layering it and layering it, and art. And Carrie says she saved all of her trimmings of fabric and batting and stuffed dog beds for her local Humane Society. That Carrie, she's so nice. And then Valerie says she likes to use trimmings for crazy quilts when she does, when I do quilts, or stuffing things when not in a quilting phase. I totally get it. So these little pieces may not be as easy to work with, but there's some that you could absolutely use for a crazy quilt. So like this could easily be used, and then this could be used. Like these little pieces could add up. I totally agree with that. And then Charlie has a suggestion. Check out the Tartan Kiwi. I have some of her patterns, but I haven't done any yet. I want to do her Emu. It's a bunch of individual foundation paper piecing pieces that you then combine. I think that sounds lovely. And actually, on that note, you guys should check out, Charlie has shared on the Quilt Stream community on Facebook some of his previous foundation paper piecing. He shared photos. So I love that you shared photos, and definitely check out all the hard work that he has done. I know that Carrie, she has done Lola, and I forget the name of the pattern designer, but it's the big llama. There's 2 llamas, but I think she did just the one. And I absolutely love, love, love it. So I guess I'm gonna have to part with you guys just by showing you that, you know, we can all be inspired to create something new with art, you know, mess it up. You can always put it back together. You can always, always make art your own and have some fun. So thanks for joining in today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We love it when you do. But hopefully you got some new passion and some new techniques to try. That's what we're all about to do. So have a great week, everybody. I will see you on Friday. Keep quilting. Bye for now.